In 1974, a film was released that was an assault on all the senses of a film fan. Almost 50 years later, and it's still widely regarded as one of the most disturbing movies ever made. The only thing more terrifying than the film are the stories of making it. And we have all the gory details on the horror slashers behind the blood, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Pelligra. Welcome to the horror slash Texas Chainsaw Massacre Behind the Blood. Don't forget to subscribe and hit your notifications tab. Alright, so often described with Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the word macabre. It's probably one of the only times I've ever heard it used in an actual sentence. To me, it kind of sounds a little bit pretentious. But anyways, here we go. Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel were the brainchilds behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So two companies were created, Vortex, which would serve as the production company, and MAB Investors Corp, which would put up the cashola for the film. So the way it would work in a perfect scenario is MAB would get all their investments paid back to them, and then all the profits would be split 50-50. But it would get a lot trickier than that. Fresh off his film Eggshells, when Tobe Hooper decided to make the film locally, the town was abuzz. A lot of people wanted to work on this production, but that was way before they knew they'd be working 7 days a week, 16-hour days in a heat wave in Texas, 1973. The van used in the film was a 1972 Ford Club wagon. The summer of 1973, when Texas Chainsaw Massacre was shot, had a massive heat wave. Set deck Rob Burns scoured the Texas farmlands looking for dead cattle to use their bones as set deck. Now that is commitment. Despite being a handful on set, Rob Burns did a masterful job at creating the ambiance in this film. In fact, some would argue he actually went above and beyond and things were a little too realistic. And it was actually Rob Burns that created the Leatherface mask out of just liquid latex, fiberglass sheets, and pin wire. Gunnar Hansen, as we all know, Leatherface, turned down the role originally because it was too brutal, but he got called into play when the original Leatherface was a drunk. In the original script, Leatherface actually had lines, but it was Gunnar Hansen that decided to omit them from the script. Tobe Hooper was on board when Gunnar Hansen decided to play Leatherface as mentally retarded. Paul Partain, who played Franklin, was a method actor, so he stayed in character and literally pissed everyone off. In the opening scene where the van is driving by a dead armadillo, the crew actually passed on using a dead horse, which coincidentally was just lying roadside. According to Rob Burns, and if we're keeping it real, he is a little bit of an egomaniac, but it was him that conceived the idea of when Leatherface hoists Pam up and slots her down onto the meat hook, that we do not see any blood, we do not see any hook coming through. It was just going to be played straight and the audience would do all their magic in their imagination. Tim Sedow, who played the cook, or the old man, had such a problem with the scene where he was beating Marilyn with the broom. So much so that he ruined take after take after take before Marilyn actually had to convince him to beat her. So, kinky. The dinner scene in the film has gone on in film lore as being one of the most nightmarish scenes to ever be shot. And depending on which cast or crew member you speak with, the scene actually lasted either 15 to 40 hours to shoot. And that's quite a range, but I think it's because everybody went crazy. Some of the reasons for the difficulties in shooting that dinner scene was the extreme heat. Gunnar Hansen says that the heat actually got to 120 degrees. During the making of that scene, they actually ran out of makeup appliances for Grandpa, played by actor John Duggan. So what had to happen was they had to keep him in makeup for the duration of the scene, no matter what and no matter how long. Imagine wearing a mask in the middle of summer for 40 hours. Another contributing factor to the infamous dinner scene's insanity was Tim Sedow's contract was set to expire when they wrapped that day. Losing him in that scene was not an option. Couldn't be done. So solution? They never wrapped the scene. Both cast and crew started becoming violently ill and vomiting on set. Animal carcasses and food started rotting, even bones started decaying in the hot lights and heat of the Texas sun. Not to mention, in order to create the scene to look like it was night, all the windows were completely boarded off and covered in black cloth. Rob Burns' idea to prevent animals from rotting was to inject them full of formaldehyde. Dorothy Pearl, who worked in the makeup department, accidentally injected herself with formaldehyde. I think she was okay. When they realized that that was not going to help their problem and eliminate the smell, they decided to burn the carcasses. That didn't work. Due to the low budget of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface, Gunnar Hansen, only had one outfit. It was said that he ended up smelling so bad that nobody could stand being with him. In the film, Leatherface wore 3 different masks. Gunnar Hansen decided to have 3 different personas for each mask. So the killer mask, he killed. There was the old lady mask, which he cooked and cleaned, and he was a little bit more domesticated. And then there was the pretty lady mask, which was time for dinner. The chainsaw that's used in the film by Leatherface is a Poulin 245A. So next time you're in the market for a chainsaw, you know what this one can do. The film was originally scheduled to shoot for 2 weeks, but it actually got doubled and shot for 4 weeks. The famous photo of the Sawyer family sitting on the porch outside the farmhouse was actually taken as a goof. And funny enough, it was stolen by a German reporter visiting the set. It ended up being in some of the German promos. 2 things. 1, glad it got stolen because we probably would never have seen that photo had it not. And 2, if Texas Chainsaw Massacre was such a poverty-driven set, what the hell was a German reporter visiting for? There is little to no musical instruments in the actual movie, minus the radio that's playing in the van. It was designed to sound like sounds coming from the perspective of animals in a slaughterhouse. Why? I have absolutely no idea. But it sure as hell worked. Marilyn Burns, who played Sally, was a noted slowpoke, and Gunnar Hansen, who was wearing lift boots, wielding a chainsaw, and was, let's face it, considerably overweight, had to actually slow his pace down in the chase scenes. You even see him wielding around the chainsaw and actually cutting thin branches for really no freaking reason at all. It got really real for Marilyn Burns on the set, who suffered multiple injuries on the set, from scrapes to bruises to black eyes to twisted ankles. It was not for the faint of heart. In order to achieve the effect where when Leatherface falls and slices his own leg, Gunnar Hansen had a metal sheet placed on his leg. Over that was the blood and effects. So when the saw cut through the pants, it would burst out the fleshy effects and then hit the sheet, not hitting his leg. However, what happened was the saw created such a burn that he thought he actually cut through his leg and jumped up in fear and in actual genuine pain, and that actual shot is in the film. 5 people die in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. However, if you talk to Terry McMinn, who played Pam, she is convinced that her character survived despite being hung on a meat hook for an undisclosed amount of time, then being thrown into a freezer for an even longer amount of time. Not to mention that when the film ends, Leatherface is still alive and returns home to where she was still in the freezer. However, somehow, in her mind, Pam is a survivor. Yeah. Funny thing, in spite of its name, Texas Chainsaw Massacre actually almost has no blood in the film. The only blood you see is pretty much the real blood of actors. The reason for this was Tobe Hooper wanted the film to be PG. What? Anyway, he not only didn't get his PG, it got slapped with an X rating before negotiations between Hooper and the ratings board finally got it down to R. It is impossible to imagine this a PG film. Again, working to keep costs down, the cast and crew were asked to defer payment until a distribution deal was struck. They were awarded points. Their understanding was that the points were taken from the total gross of the film, not just the 50% that Vortex owned. Remember that little deal I was talking about in the front? So basically, if an actor thought they were making $100, they actually made $50. The film's budget of $60,000 proved to be nowhere near enough. And with the lengthy schedule of post-production, Vortex was even forced to sell more shares, and that included Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel's profits. An extra $80,000 was required to finish the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre budget has been largely in question over the years, and the safe range would probably be around $125,000 to $300,000. The not-so-complete film was shown to different companies in hopes of getting more funding. However, there were no takers until Bryanston Films came along and instantly was in. Oh, and by the way, Bryanston were mafia. Finally, in October of 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre opened in parts of Texas. When film critic Rex Reed said it was the scariest movie he has ever seen, it took off. But did he actually say that? The answer? No. In fact, it kind of got conveniently altered. In reality, Rex Reed said it was the most horrifying film he has seen. It's a small little difference. Unfortunately for the cast and crew that really endured hell on earth while making the film, another kick in the balls was coming. Remember those points that they were owed? Film went on to make millions. They thought they were cashing in big, but in reality, they received very little. Like very, very little. So let me break it down to you. Here's what happened. So the assumption was Vortex owned the film and that everybody was going to get a percentage from Vortex's take. But what they didn't know is what I told you in the beginning, how Vortex owned 50% and actually MAB was gonna get the other 50% after they made their money back. So they weren't getting money from 100%, they were getting it from a 50%. But then they had to sell off even more shares, like I said earlier, and then you throw in the mafia, Bryanston, and you've got yourself a big mess when it comes to paying your cast and crew. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre goes on to make millions of dollars, and you have a very, very small cast and crew. So that should be a lot of money, right? Wrong. So to give you an example, Gunnar Hansen said that his first royalty check from Texas Chainsaw Massacre was $47. According to Bryanston's numbers, Vortex made a cool $5,734. So when the producers decided to sue Bryanston Films, they met with the contentious head of Bryanston, Butchie Lou Perino. So after enduring some threats from Butchie and Bryanston, no joke, they were finally awarded back in an out-of-court settlement $400,000, which, okay, it was a little bit of a win, but really it was not. At the end of the long day, New Line Cinema ended up with the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think fans are pretty happy with that one. The film was blacklisted in Europe for 20 years. Blacklisted! The monotone mood-setting narration at the beginning of the film was performed by Emmy Award-winning John Larroquette of Night Court fame. John Larroquette went on to say that his payment for the film was a joint. To this day, John Larroquette admits that he has never seen the film. While the film's legend grew over the years to mythical status, one steadfast belief was that it was based on a true story. This is not true. Although it was loosely based on 1950s whack job Ed Gein, it was not a true story. Tobe Hooper admits to have thinking up the story for Texas Chainsaw Massacre while waiting in line at a hardware store during Christmas. And also in the monologue, if you listen to it, it says on August 18th, 1973. Well, the film was shot in 1973, so it couldn't be true. However, many people believe that the raw and crude fashion in which it was filmed looked almost like a documentary. And back then, hey, maybe we knew a little bit less than we know now. All in all, it's cool for storytelling. In 1988, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a family portrait was released, and it featured Leatherface, Old Man, Hitchhiker, and Grandpa. All of them were put together in a documentary where they would tell tales about life on the set. It was a really cool concept, and although the production value is very, very low, it is a must-see if you haven't and you're a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan. One of the greatest things working for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the fact that it's called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In horror history, there are very few titles that evoke such visuals in your head. However, the original title was Head Cheese. Thank God. Entertainment Weekly calls it the second scariest film of all time, but it's Entertainment Weekly, so really, who cares? Despite the horrors of making the film and bringing it to the screen, the filmmakers' objectives far superseded their expectation. You can see many of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre locations in the 2002 short film Head Cheese. The film was not only a smash hit dollar-wise, it plays in the conscience of horror fans all around the world. In the subsequent years, it spawned sequels and reboots, which proves one thing: the appetite for cannibalism is alive and well. Those are the behind the scenes reasons why Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a hit, and it almost marries with the horror that you see on screen. Texas Chainsaw Massacre made $30,859,000 domestic gross. It was released on October 1st in 1974, has a runtime of 1 hour 23 minutes. The budget, again, was around $125,000 to $300,000 and received an MPAA rating of R, much to Tobe Hooper's dismay. Have you ever wanted to visit some of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre locations? Well, here are some of the cool locations. If you're ever in Leander, Texas, the graveyard can be visited at Hero Way West and North Baghdad. If you want to go to where the house was originally located, you can check out the GPS locations I have provided. Unfortunately, they're developing rapidly there, and the only block of land that's still left is where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house once stood, but you better get there quick. If you want to visit the house, luckily for fans, it was uprooted from its original location and moved to 1010 Kings Court. It's a little bit of a drive from where it was originally located, but it actually stands as a restaurant. You can go in and eat there. And the other cool thing is, not long ago, some super fans bought the gas station at 1073 Texas 304. And what they did here was really cool. They actually built cabins where you could stay. At night, they played Texas Chainsaw Massacre for you to watch. Also, the gas station is turned into a memorabilia place, and they even have a replica of the van used in the film on their location. So check them out. For Texas fans, that's pretty cool. I'm Jason Pelligra. Thanks for watching the horror / behind the blood Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notifications button, check us out on social media, and we'll see you soon.